My name is Ramona, and I'm 28 years old from Boston. For most of my life, my parents treated me like their personal maid rather than their daughter. I cooked, cleaned, and served while my brother enjoyed the privileges of being their actual child. I never thought things would change until that fateful corporate dinner when the CEO my parents desperately wanted to impress called me boss, right in front of them. The look on their faces as their perfect world crumbled is something I'll never forget. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, you'll understand this journey. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you appreciate people who treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their perceived status. My early childhood memories of my parents, Harold and Diana Thompson, weren't always negative. There was a time when they treated me like a normal child with birthday parties, bedtime stories, and weekend outings to the park. We lived in a spacious colonial home in an affluent Boston suburb, the kind with manicured lawns and neighbors who competed over holiday decorations. My father worked as a marketing executive for a national retail chain, while my mother sold luxury real estate to the city's elite. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family, complete with a golden retriever named Max and annual Christmas card photos where we all wore matching outfits. The shift in how my parents treated me began subtly around my 10th birthday. That was the year my father received a significant promotion and my mother started selling properties in the most exclusive neighborhoods. Suddenly, social connections became paramount in our household. Every dinner conversation revolved around which important person they'd met or what exclusive event they'd been invited to. It was also around this time that my brother Jackson was born. From the moment he arrived, it was clear he would be the golden child. My parents transformed our guest room into an elaborate nursery with hand-painted murals and custom furniture. Meanwhile, my birthday that year consisted of a store-bought cake and a reminder that big girls don't need parties anymore. The first time I noticed the disparity in our treatment was when I was assigned chores, while Jackson, even as he grew older, was encouraged to focus on sports and play. Initially, the responsibilities seemed reasonable for an older child. I would set the table for dinner or help put away groceries. But gradually, these tasks multiplied. Our home was beautiful by anyone's standards. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with marble countertops, and a backyard with a built-in pool. Yet maintaining this showcase became increasingly my responsibility. By 12, I was vacuuming the entire house twice weekly, dusting the countless decorative items my mother collected, and even scrubbing toilets. I remember asking my mother why Jackson never had to help with chores when he turned 8, the age I had started taking on household responsibilities. "Your brother needs to focus on his studies and baseball," she replied dismissively. "Besides, these skills will serve you well someday. A woman's value is in her usefulness." That phrase became a recurring theme in my upbringing. Whenever I questioned the unfairness of my situation, either parent would respond with some variation of it. "A useful woman is never without prospects," my mother would say, or my father's version, "Nobody wants a wife who can't maintain a proper home." When I expressed interest in business courses in middle school, inspired by a career day presentation, my mother laughed. "Business is for men like your father. Focus on practical skills, Ramona." By 13, I had stopped sharing my dreams with my parents. I still harbored ambitions of becoming an executive like the powerful woman who had visited our school, dressed in a sharp suit and speaking confidently about quarterly projections and market expansion. But I kept these thoughts to myself, hiding business magazines under my mattress like other teenagers might hide inappropriate content. The contrast between my life and Jackson's grew more pronounced with each passing year. He received the latest video games and sports equipment, while I was given practical items like cookbooks or organizers for Christmas. His academic achievements, even mediocre ones, were celebrated enthusiastically, while my consistently high grades were expected and unremarkable. "Of course you get good grades," my father would say. "You have nothing else to distract you." This was far from true. Between my schoolwork and the increasingly demanding household duties, I barely had time for myself. I rose before everyone else to prepare breakfast, packed lunches for the family-attended school all day, where I maintained a 4.0 GPA, then returned home to start dinner preparations and evening cleaning. Weekends offered no respite. Those were reserved for deep cleaning the house, doing the family's laundry, and helping my mother prepare for the social events that had become regular occurrences in our home. All while watching Jackson enjoy his childhood from the periphery of rooms I was busy cleaning. My high school years brought even more responsibilities and a sharper awareness of just how abnormal my family dynamic truly was. While other teenagers worried about prom dates and driver's licenses, I managed our household like an unpaid housekeeper. Each morning began at 5:30, a full hour before anyone else stirred. I would prepare a full breakfast for the family, French toast for Jackson, egg white omelets for mother, and black coffee with the newspaper properly ironed for father. Yes, ironed. My father insisted that newspaper creases interfered with his morning routine. After serving everyone, I would quickly eat whatever remained while cleaning up the kitchen. Most mornings, I barely had time to get myself ready for school, often arriving with damp hair and minimal preparation time for tests or presentations. Despite these challenges, I maintained perfect grades. Education became my secret rebellion and potential escape route. In the school library, I found peace and purpose devouring books on business economics and technology when I should have been studying home economics as my mother suggested. It was during junior year that I met Ms. Harriet Jordan, my advanced placement economics teacher. She was the first person to truly see me beyond my carefully constructed facade of normalcy. "You have a remarkable mind for business strategy, Ramona," she told me after I presented a complex analysis of a case study. "Have you considered pursuing this at the university level?" When I explained that my parents expected me to focus on more practical skills, her expression shifted from confusion to concern. Over the following weeks, she took special interest in my situation, offering career guidance and university brochures during lunch periods. These meetings became precious islands of validation in an ocean of invisibility. Meanwhile, at home, my parents' social climbing intensified. They hosted dinner parties nearly every weekend, each more elaborate than the last. These events were performances of wealth and status, with my mother showcasing her decorator's eye and my father displaying his wine knowledge and business connections. For these gatherings, I was expected to prepare multi-course meals under my mother's exacting supervision, serve the guests with professional precision, and clean up afterward, while the adults enjoyed drinks in the living room. My parents introduced me to guests as "our Ramona, who's such a help around the house," rather than as their daughter with accomplishments and dreams of her own. One particular incident from when I was 16 remains burned in my memory. During a dinner party for my father's colleagues, a guest commented, "Your daughter has such poise serving the table. She could work in fine dining." My mother's response was swift. "Oh, Ramona isn't really participating in our dinner tonight. She's just helping out as usual." The guest looked confused. "But isn't she your daughter?" There was an uncomfortable pause before my mother replied with a tight smile. "Of course, technically, but tonight she's helping us host. Jackson will join for dessert. He has a baseball game highlight video to show everyone." I stood there holding a tray of canapés, my face burning with humiliation as I was erased as a daughter and redefined as staff in front of a dozen strangers. That night, I cried silently into my pillow, wondering what I had done to deserve such treatment from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Despite my home situation, I continued excelling academically, particularly in business-related courses. I developed a passion for the intersection of business administration and technology, fascinated by how digital solutions could streamline operations and create new opportunities. As senior year approached, I began secretly applying to colleges using Ms. Jordan's classroom address for correspondence. My parents had made it clear they expected me to continue living at home after graduation, perhaps taking community college classes while maintaining the household. "There's no need for expensive universities," my father declared when I broached the subject. "What will you do with a fancy degree anyway? Find a practical husband and settle down." While I filled out applications late at night, my brother Jackson's mediocre academic performance and average baseball skills continued receiving lavish praise. His B- in basic algebra earned a celebratory dinner out, while my acceptance into National Honor Society went unacknowledged. My parents had mastered manipulation tactics that kept me in my place. Sometimes it was guilt. "After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Other times, emotional withdrawal days of cold silence if I failed to meet their expectations. Occasionally, they would offer small rewards for exceptional service, like allowing me to use the car to run their errands presented as generous privileges rather than further exploitation. These tactics had worked for years, keeping me trapped in a cycle of seeking approval I would never truly receive. But as college acceptance letters began arriving at Ms. Jordan's classroom, I started to envision a different future one, where my value wasn't measured by how well I polished silverware or pressed table linens. The day I received my full scholarship to Westridge University was both the happiest and most terrifying of my life up to that point. The prestigious business school was offering me complete financial coverage based on my academic achievements and compelling personal essays where I had carefully coded my family situation as character-building challenges. When I finally gathered the courage to tell my parents about the scholarship, their reaction was exactly as I had feared. "This is how you thank us for everything by abandoning your family," my mother said, tears strategically appearing at the corners of her eyes. "Who will help me maintain the house? Your father's position requires entertaining. We need you here." My father took a different approach. "Do you have any idea how expensive living on your own will be? This scholarship may cover tuition, but what about all the other costs? You'll come crawling back within a month." In the weeks leading up to my departure, they employed every manipulation tactic they had perfected over the years. My mother accidentally disposed of college paperwork I needed to complete. My father suggested they might have to sell the family home without my help maintaining it, making me responsible for potential family hardship. The night before I left, my mother entered my nearly packed room and sat on my bed with an uncharacteristic gentleness. "I only wanted to prepare you for the real world, Ramona," she said softly. "A woman needs to know how to manage a household. Your generation thinks these skills aren't important, but they're what keep families together." For a moment, I almost believed there was genuine concern beneath her controlling behavior. Almost. The next morning, they drove me to campus in silence. As we unloaded my meager belongings, my father handed me an envelope. "Emergency fund," he said gruffly. "When things get tough, and they will, this will cover a bus ticket home." I later discovered it contained exactly $67.50, not even enough for the bus fare from Westridge to Boston. The message was clear: they expected and perhaps wanted me to fail. My roommate, Sophia Martinez, arrived shortly after my parents left. With her vibrant personality and genuine warmth, she became my first real friend. Coming from a large, loving Puerto Rican family, she was baffled by my lack of basic experiences, like never having had a birthday party as a teenager or not knowing how to swim despite our backyard pool. "Your parents never taught you to swim in your own pool?" she asked incredulously during orientation week. "They were busy with work and social obligations." I explained, the excuse sounding hollow even to my ears. "And someone needed to prepare lunch for everyone else who was swimming." Sophia's expression of shock and then compassion was the first indication that my upbringing had been far from normal. Through her, I began to understand what healthy family dynamics looked like. Her parents called daily just to say they loved her. They sent care packages with homemade treats and silly dollar store items that made her smile. When they visited campus, they brought enough food to feed our entire dormitory and treated me with more parental affection than I had experienced in years. Despite the freedom of college, I struggled to shed the servant identity that had been cultivated throughout my childhood. I found myself automatically cleaning our shared dorm room, doing Sophia's laundry without being asked, and feeling intense anxiety if I focused on my own needs. "Ramona, stop cleaning my side of the room," Sophia would say gently. "You're not my maid. You're my friend and an amazing student who should be focusing on that business ethics paper." With her encouragement, I declared a major in business technology despite my parents' disapproval during our infrequent phone calls. "What practical skills will that teach you?" my mother demanded. "You should study something that will make you a good wife and mother." To support myself beyond the scholarship that covered tuition and basic housing, I worked 3 campus jobs, morning shifts at the cafeteria, afternoon hours at the library, and weekend administrative work for the business school. Every dollar I earned represented another step toward true independence. The rare visits home during holidays immediately reverted to the old patterns. Within minutes of arriving, I would find myself assigned to kitchen duty or folding laundry, while Jackson, now in high school, played video games. These visits became shorter each year as I invented internships and study groups that required my presence on campus. 4 years later, I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from several technology firms. My parents attended graduation only because the neighbors would have found it strange if they hadn't. They sat stiffly through the ceremony, barely applauding when I crossed the stage. "Well, that's done then," my father said afterward. "I suppose you'll be moving back home until you find a husband." Instead, I informed them I had accepted a position at Nexus Innovations, an emerging tech company with revolutionary ideas about integrated business solutions. The job was in Chicago, 1,000 miles from Boston and their influence. "You'll regret this," my mother warned. "Family is everything. Who will take care of you if you fail?" I didn't have an answer then, but as I drove my used car packed with everything I owned toward my new life, I felt a fragile sense of hope blooming. For the first time, I would be valued not for how well I served others, but for my mind, my skills, and my contributions. 2 years into my career at Nexus Innovations, my life had transformed in ways I could scarcely have imagined while scrubbing my parents' kitchen floor as a teenager. What began as an entry-level position in project coordination quickly evolved as my natural organizational skills and technological aptitude caught the attention of senior management. My first breakthrough came 6 months into the job when I identified significant inefficiencies in how the company managed client projects. Drawing on both my formal education and years of running a household with military precision, I developed a comprehensive project management system that integrated client communication, resource allocation, and deadline tracking. "This is remarkable work, Ramona," my department head said after reviewing my proposal. "Where did you learn to think so systematically about process optimization?" I almost laughed at the irony. "I've had a lot of practice juggling multiple responsibilities and stakeholder expectations," I replied, thinking of the elaborate dinner parties I had single-handedly prepared while simultaneously maintaining a perfect GPA. The implementation of my system led to a 20% increase in on-time project completion and a 15% reduction in resource waste. Within months, I was promoted to team leader with my own staff to manage and significantly higher compensation. Despite these professional victories, I still battled the insidious voice of self-doubt that my parents had cultivated. Each success was shadowed by the fear that I didn't truly deserve it, that I was an imposter who would eventually be exposed. In meetings, I would over-prepare to the point of exhaustion, terrified of making even minor mistakes that might confirm I didn't belong. It was during this time that I met James Hawkins, a software developer who collaborated with my team on implementing my project management system. James came from a warm, supportive family that was everything mine wasn't, with parents who celebrated their children's individuality rather than trying to mold them into servants or trophies. Our relationship developed slowly as I struggled to believe that someone could value me for myself rather than for what I could do for them. The first time he cooked dinner for me, I felt physically uncomfortable sitting at the table while someone else served me. When he shooed me away from washing dishes afterward, I nearly had a panic attack. "You're not a guest, Ramona," he said, confused by my insistence on cleaning. "But you're not the maid either. We're equals. Sometimes I'll cook, sometimes you will. Same with cleaning." The concept of equitable relationship dynamics was foreign and frightening. I had been raised to believe my worth lay in service to others, particularly men. James's expectation of partnership rather than servitude required a complete rewiring of my understanding of relationships. As my career at Nexus continued its upward trajectory, my parents' fortunes took the opposite path. My father lost his executive position during a corporate restructuring, a casualty of changing market dynamics, and his refusal to adapt to digital transformation. My mother's real estate business struggled as younger, more tech-savvy agents captured the market with virtual tours and social media marketing. Suddenly, after years of minimal contact, they began calling regularly. The conversations always began with superficial inquiries about my well-being before inevitably turning to subtle and not-so-subtle requests. "Your father and I are considering updating our kitchen," my mother mentioned during one call. "Doesn't your company do something with technology? Perhaps you know someone who could give us a discount on appliances." When I explained that Nexus Innovations developed business software, not kitchen appliances, she sighed dramatically. "Well, I thought since you're working for a big company now, you might have connections. That's how the world works, Ramona. It's all about who you know. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of treating me as the help, they now saw me as potentially useful in a different way. They never asked about my actual work or expressed pride in my accomplishments. I was still valuable only for what I could provide, just in a new context. Meanwhile, my brother Jackson had followed a path that surprised no one who understood our family dynamics. Without the discipline that comes from natural consequences, he had drifted through college on our parents' dime, changing majors 3 times before graduating with a mediocre GPA in communications. His attempt to start an event planning business failed within 6 months, and he had moved back into our childhood home, where my mother undoubtedly prepared his meals and did his laundry. Despite the emotional progress I had made through therapy, which I began soon after starting at Nexus, I still struggled with setting firm boundaries with my family. When they called, I answered. When they mentioned financial difficulties, I felt guilty about my growing success. The programming ran deep. Amara Washington, my mentor at Nexus and the company's first female senior vice president, noticed my distraction after a particularly draining call from my mother. "Family stuff," she asked perceptively as we reviewed quarterly projections. When I nodded, she shared her own experience with difficult family dynamics and the importance of establishing healthy boundaries. "Your success threatens the story they've told themselves about who you are and what you're capable of. That's about them, not you." Her guidance helped me maintain professional focus despite my family's increasing demands on my attention. This focus paid off when I was promoted to department head for solution implementation, a role that placed me directly below senior management in the company hierarchy and came with substantial salary and stock options. For the first time in my life, I was financially secure, professionally respected, and personally valued in my relationship with James. I began to build a life based on mutual respect rather than servitude. What I didn't realize was that this newfound stability was about to collide dramatically with my past in a way that would force a final reckoning with the family dynamics I had fled but never truly escaped. The email from my mother arrived on a Tuesday morning as I reviewed quarterly performance metrics in my corner office. The subject line read, "Important family dinner, please respond." Already unusual since our communications had dwindled to occasional holiday calls, I opened it with a sense of foreboding. "Dearest Ramona," it began an endearment she had never used in my presence. "Your father and I are hosting a special dinner this Saturday for some important business connections. We would be so grateful if you could attend. It's been too long since we've had our whole family together." The tone was jarringly warm compared to our recent interactions. After consulting with my therapist and James, I cautiously agreed to attend, setting clear boundaries about my arrival and departure times. What my mother's email hadn't mentioned, but I discovered through a casual conversation with a colleague, was that my parents were attempting to secure a contract with Nexus Innovations through a mutual business acquaintance. The connection was too coincidental to ignore. Saturday arrived, and I drove to my childhood home with a mixture of anxiety and a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer the powerless child or teenager desperate for approval. I was Ramona Thompson, department head at Nexus Innovations, respected professional and worthy human being, regardless of what validation I received from Harold and Diana Thompson. The house looked exactly as I remembered, immaculate and showcasing my mother's dedication to appearances. As I rang the doorbell rather than using my old key, I straightened my shoulders and reminded myself that I was a guest here now, not the help. My mother opened the door wearing a designer dress I suspected she couldn't afford, her face momentarily registering surprise at my professional appearance before shifting into a practiced social smile. "Ramona, darling, come in," she exclaimed loudly enough for whoever was already inside to hear. "We've missed you so much." She air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup, then whispered, "The kitchen is a disaster. Could you help finish the appetizers before everyone arrives?" And there it was, not even 5 seconds into my visit, the assumption that I would naturally slip back into my role as unpaid household staff. I took a deep breath. "I'm afraid I can't, Mother. I came as a guest, not as kitchen help, but I'd be happy to greet the other guests with you." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, dear. I just thought since you always had such a knack for presentation." I followed her into the living room where my father was arranging drinks with the same pretentious precision he had always applied to maintaining appearances. Jackson lounged on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, looking older but essentially unchanged. "Look who's finally graced us with her presence," my father commented without looking up. "I was beginning to think you were too important for family gatherings." Before I could respond, my mother interjected. "Ramona works for that tech company I mentioned, Harold, the one Lawrence Blackwell is associated with." At the mention of my CEO's name, my father's demeanor changed instantly. He looked up, finally truly seeing me, though I recognized it wasn't me he was seeing, but a potential business advantage. "Lawrence Blackwell. You work at his company, what department?" he asked with sudden interest. "I head the solution implementation department," I replied evenly. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, quickly masked. "That's nice. Entry-level positions can lead to good opportunities with the right connections." I didn't bother correcting his assumption. Years of therapy had taught me that my parents' inability to recognize my achievements was about their limitations, not mine. As early guests began arriving, the pattern became clear. My parents introduced me as "our daughter who works at Nexus Innovations," without specifying my role, then promptly directed me to help serve drinks or show guests to the bathroom. Old habits die hard for all involved, and I found myself automatically complying a few times before catching myself. The dinner table conversation revolved around business opportunities and social connections, with my father dominating discussions about market trends he barely understood, and my mother dropping names of influential people who had once visited their home. Jackson occasionally interjected with exaggerated stories of his failed business ventures, recast as learning experiences in preparation for his next big opportunity. Throughout the meal, my mother made repeated references to Lawrence from Nexus, who would be joining later for dessert, having had another commitment earlier. The way she used his first name suggested a familiarity I knew to be fictional. As coffee was being served, the doorbell rang. My mother practically leapt from her chair. "That must be Lawrence!" she exclaimed with poorly disguised excitement. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. I had no idea my CEO had actually accepted an invitation to my parents' home. Lawrence Blackwell was known for being selective about social engagements, focusing on meaningful connections rather than obligatory networking. Why he would agree to visit my parents' dinner party was baffling. My mother returned to the dining room with Lawrence Blackwell beside her, her hand proprietarily on his arm as she made introductions around the table. When she reached me, her introduction was particularly telling. "And you've probably seen our Ramona around the office. She works in your company somewhere in implementation, I believe." Lawrence Blackwell looked at me with genuine surprise, then broke into a warm smile that transformed his usually serious demeanor. "Ramona Thompson," he said, moving toward me with extended hand. "There's my star executive. How are you, boss?" The room fell silent. My father's coffee cup froze midway to his lips. "Boss," my mother echoed weakly. "Absolutely," Lawrence continued, apparently oblivious to the tension suddenly filling the room. "Ramona here is one of our most valuable department heads. Her implementation team has the highest client satisfaction ratings in the company. The board just approved her proposal for the new client integration system last week. $20 million investment based largely on her track record of excellence." He turned to address my visibly shocked parents directly. "You must be incredibly proud. When I heard Ramona was your daughter, I rearranged my schedule specifically to meet the people who raised such an exceptional leader. Her management style combines remarkable efficiency with genuine care for her team members. That kind of balanced leadership is rare." The expressions on my parents' faces were indescribable mixtures of confusion, disbelief, and the dawning realization that the daughter they had relegated to household servitude was in fact a respected executive who outranked many of the business connections they had spent years cultivating. "We are very proud." My father managed finally shooting me a look that demanded an explanation for my apparent deception. My mother recovered more quickly, her social training kicking in. "Of course we are. We always knew Ramona would excel once she found her path. I always told her, didn't I, dear, that she had leadership potential." Lawrence turned back to me with a conspiratorial smile. "Actually, the other reason I wanted to come tonight was to discuss your potential promotion in person." The VP position opening up next quarter, Ramona. The board and I agree you should be preparing for it. I thought meeting your family would give me insight into where you got your remarkable work ethic. And there it was laid bare in front of everyone who had systematically undermined my self-worth for years, the truth of who I had become, despite their efforts rather than because of them. The remainder of the dinner unfolded in a surreal atmosphere of revised history and strained conversation. My parents performed an impressive display of revisionist parenting, suddenly recalling non-existent moments when they had encouraged my career aspirations or supported my independence. We always told Ramona to reach for the stars, my mother claimed, addressing Lawrence while refilling his wineglass for the third time. Even as a little girl, she showed such promise with organization. Remember, Harold, how she would arrange her toys by color and function? My father nodded sagely. We invested significantly in her education. Always believed higher learning was the foundation for success. The blatant fabrications were almost laughable. The only investment they had made was the gas used to drive me to campus before abandoning me with $67.50. Lawrence listened politely occasionally, glancing my way with expressions suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced by their performance. As a CEO who had risen through the ranks based on genuine merit and emotional intelligence, he likely recognized the uncomfortable dynamics at play. Throughout the conversation, Lawrence continued referring to actual projects I had spearheaded and decisions I had made clearly, revealing the substantial authority I wielded at Nexus. With each example, my parents' faces performed subtle gymnastics between pride in the achievements they could now claim by association and discomfort at the independence those achievements represented. Jackson remained uncharacteristically quiet, occasionally shooting me looks that ranged from confusion to something approaching grudging respect. The golden child was witnessing the servant's coronation, and it clearly disrupted his understanding of our family's natural order. As the evening wound down, Lawrence thanked my parents for their hospitality and turned to me. "Ramona, could I have a word with you outside before I leave? I'd like to discuss the Parker account transition." Grateful for the escape, I followed him to the porch, where, out of earshot from my family, he immediately dropped the pretense. "I apologize if I overstepped by coming tonight," he said quietly. "When your mother contacted our office claiming to be close personal friends, I was skeptical. When I realized you were her daughter, I became curious. Your exceptional work has always seemed driven by something beyond normal professional ambition." I was stunned by his perception and unsure how to respond. He continued gently, "I recognize family dynamics like these. My own upbringing had similar expectations. Sometimes the people who should support us the most are the ones who see us the least." His unexpected understanding brought tears to my eyes that I quickly blinked away. "Thank you for coming," I managed, "and for seeing me both professionally and now." He nodded, understanding the layers in my gratitude. "For what it's worth, that VP position isn't fabricated. We'll be discussing it formally next week. Your work stands on its own merit regardless of your background or connections." After Lawrence departed, I returned inside to find my parents waiting in the living room, their expressions a mixture of calculation and newfound respect, tinged with resentment. "Why didn't you tell us you had such an important position?" my mother demanded without preamble. "We've been made to look foolish in front of an influential business leader." "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "When I graduated with honors, you asked when I was moving home to find a husband. When I got my first promotion, you asked if I could get a discount on kitchen appliances." My father intervened, his tone conciliatory but eyes cold. "The past is the past, Ramona. Families have misunderstandings. What matters now is that we support each other. With your position and our connections, we could establish quite a beneficial arrangement." The implication was crystal clear. I was finally valuable to them, not as a daughter, but as a business asset to be leveraged. After years of treating me as the help, they now saw me as a useful stepping stone to social and financial advancement. "I was never a misunderstanding to you," I said, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I was convenient. I was useful. I was never your daughter, not really." "That's absurd." My mother snapped, her social mask slipping. "We gave you everything. A beautiful home education guidance. You gave me chores instead of childhood, criticism instead of encouragement, servitude instead of love. While Jackson received praise for existing, I received instructions for serving. My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. For perhaps the first time, he was hearing the unvarnished truth about our disparate upbringings. I cooked your meals while doing AP coursework. I cleaned your house while maintaining perfect grades. I served your guests while dreaming of a life where I was valued for my mind rather than my usefulness. And now that I've built that life completely without your help, you want to claim credit and benefit from it. My father stood, his face flushing with anger. You've humiliated us tonight. After everything we sacrificed for you, this is your gratitude, embarrassing us in front of business connections. I didn't embarrass you, I replied calmly. I simply existed as myself instead of the servant you tried to make me. The embarrassment you feel is the gap between the parents you pretended to be tonight and the parents you actually were. My mother began to cry, strategic tears she had deployed countless times to regain control of situations. How can you be so cruel? We only wanted what was best for you. No, I corrected her gently. You wanted what was best for yourselves. There's a difference. Jackson suddenly spoke up. She's right, Mom. You and Dad treated Ramona like staff, not family. I saw it happening but never said anything because it benefited me. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Ramona. I should have spoken up. His unexpected acknowledgement nearly broke my composure, but I maintained the boundary I had come to establish. I'm setting terms for any future relationship between us. I won't be manipulated, used, or treated as less than family. I won't provide financial support or business connections. I'm your daughter, not your maid, and not your business opportunity. Either accept that or accept that we won't have a relationship. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at me as though seeing a stranger, which in many ways they were. The obedient, invisible girl they had cultivated no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who understood her worth beyond her usefulness to others. I'll see myself out, I said, finally gathering my purse and jacket. You can reach me if you decide a real relationship is something you want. Until then, I wish you well. As I walked out the front door of my childhood home, I felt simultaneously hollowed out and filled with a new kind of strength. In my car, safely out of sight, I finally allowed myself to break down sobs racking my body as years of suppressed grief and anger found release. Through tears, I called James, who had been on standby, knowing how difficult the evening would be. His steady voice anchored me as I drove away from my past toward the future I had built for myself. Later that night, I also called Amara, who understood family trauma in ways few others in my life could. You've done the hardest thing, she assured me. You've spoken your truth and set your boundaries. Whatever happens next, you've reclaimed your story. As I fell into exhausted sleep that night, I realized I was finally free from seeking approval I would never receive, and validation that had always been conditional. The grief was real and profound, but underneath it lay the foundation of a life built on self-worth rather than servitude. 6 months after the fateful dinner party, I sat in my new office on the executive floor of Nexus Innovations headquarters. The vice president nameplate on my door still gave me a small thrill each time I saw it. Not because of status or power, but because it represented recognition of my genuine contributions and capabilities. The path to healing from my childhood had not been linear. Despite professional success and the unwavering support of chosen family, I still sometimes found myself automatically jumping up to clear dishes at dinner parties or apologizing excessively for taking up space. Old programming runs deep, as my therapist frequently reminded me. One of my first initiatives as VP was establishing a company mentorship program specifically targeting young women from disadvantaged backgrounds. The program provided not just professional guidance, but also support for recognizing and breaking harmful patterns that kept talented people from recognizing their own worth. Your experiences, though painful, have given you unique insight, Lawrence commented during a board presentation on the program. You've transformed personal difficulty into systemic improvement. That's the essence of true leadership. My relationship with my parents had entered a new phase of limited, carefully boundaried contact. After 2 months of silence following my ultimatum, my mother had called with a stilted apology that skirted the edges of true accountability, but represented more acknowledgement than I had ever received previously. "I may not understand all of your feelings," she had said carefully, "but I recognize that your perceptions of your childhood are painful. Perhaps there were expectations that were unfair. It wasn't a full recognition of the emotional neglect and exploitation I had experienced, but it was a starting point. Our occasional phone calls remained somewhat formal, but no longer revolved around requests for favors or attempts at manipulation. Progress, however incremental, was still progress. My father had taken longer to make any contact, his pride wounded by both my confrontation and the realization that his daughter had achieved greater professional success than he had. When he finally called 3 months after the dinner party, his approach was characteristically practical. "Your mother misses you," he stated without preamble. "Family should remain connected regardless of disagreements." Over time, his gruff acknowledgments evolved into something approaching respect, particularly when business acquaintances mentioned my name or innovations at Nexus. There was a certain irony in his newfound willingness to claim parental pride in professional circles, but I had learned to accept the relationship for what it was rather than what I wished it could be. The most surprising development came from my brother Jackson. Away from our parents' influence and faced with the stark reality of how differently we had been treated, he had sought therapy himself and reached out with a genuine apology. "I was a selfish kid who took advantage of a messed up situation," he admitted during a lunch meeting that marked our first one-on-one conversation as adults. "I watched them treat you like hired help while I got everything handed to me. I'm truly sorry, Ramona." His acknowledgement healed something in me that professional success and romantic love couldn't quite reach the specific wound of a sibling who had witnessed your mistreatment and benefited from it. We were building a tentative new relationship based on honesty rather than the artificial roles assigned in our childhood home. My chosen family had expanded beyond James, who had proposed on my birthday with a simple, heartfelt promise to always see and value me for exactly who I was. Sophia remained my closest friend, our college bond strengthened by shared achievements and mutual support through adult challenges. Amara had transitioned from mentor to friend and confidant, our shared experiences of family dysfunction creating a shorthand understanding between us. Together, they had helped me recognize that family is ultimately defined by how people treat you, not by biological connections or shared histories. Sometimes the family we choose provides the love, support, and recognition our biological families cannot. The most profound change wasn't external, but internal. The persistent voice that had whispered, "I was only valuable when serving others," had quieted, replaced by a growing certainty that my worth was inherent and unconditional. I no longer measured my value by productivity or usefulness to others. This transformation was tested when I hired a new executive assistant, a young woman named Taylor, who reminded me uncomfortably of my younger self. Her eagerness to please, working through lunches and staying late without recording overtime, triggered recognition of familiar patterns. Rather than exploiting her people-pleasing tendencies as my parents had mine, I took her to lunch and shared enough of my story to explain why maintaining boundaries was crucial for both personal well-being and professional effectiveness. "Your value here is not measured by self-sacrifice," I told her. "Take your lunch breaks, leave at reasonable hours, do excellent work within appropriate boundaries. That's what will earn respect, including self-respect." The most symbolic moment in my healing journey came during a dinner party James and I hosted in our new home. As I moved to clear plates between courses, he gently took my hand. "Sit down, love. We agreed everyone helps with cleanup later. Remember, enjoy being a guest at your own table." My friends, seeing my momentary discomfort, launched into a cheerful debate about the best way to stack a dishwasher, creating space for me to simply be present without serving. In that ordinary moment, surrounded by people who truly saw and valued me, I felt the full circle of my journey from servitude to self-worth. When my parents called the following week to ask if I would attend a gathering they were hosting to celebrate my success, I politely declined, suggesting we meet for lunch instead in a neutral location. The boundaries I had established were firm but not punitive, designed to protect my well-being while allowing for potential growth in our relationship. The journey from maid to boss in my parents' eyes had been long and painful, but the true transformation had nothing to do with job titles or others' perceptions. It was about recognizing that my inherent worth had always existed independent of how useful I was to others or what services I provided. true value I had learned comes from being not serving. We contribute to others' lives most meaningfully when we show up as our authentic selves, not when we diminish ourselves to meet others' expectations or demands. This realization doesn't mean I stopped caring for others or contributing to their well-being. Rather, it meant those actions came from a place of genuine choice and love, not obligation or fear. Service freely given from self-respect is beautiful. Service coerced through emotional manipulation is exploitation even when it comes from family. As I look back on the journey from invisible girl to confident woman, I'm struck by how many others carry similar wounds from childhood. Perhaps my story resonates with your own experiences of being undervalued or treated as less than you deserve. If so, please know that your worth has never depended on your usefulness to others. It exists simply because you do. Has someone in your life ever made you feel like your value was tied to what you could do for them rather than who you are? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story helped you recognize your own worth, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this reminder too. Thank you for witnessing my journey from servant to self-respect, and remember, we all deserve to be seen for who we truly are.